Good morning. Welcome everyone to this gathering as we join together in circle as we warm the spaces between us on an otherwise chilly, sunny morning. This morning we welcome you here in Edmonton. We welcome you in Saskatoon. We welcome you wherever you join us from online this morning. And as we gather together, we recognize that it's many ways that we are community with one another. And we relish all of them, and we are happy that we can join together in this circle and in the wider circles of our lives. This morning, we have the opportunity to continue our series that we've been going through, our letters of the alphabet, the ABCs for deeper living. This morning, we focus on the letter S for shape. Figured it should start with SH just to throw some people off. When we go through this series, it's been fascinating from this perspective. I hope also from yours to ponder the real places where we can contemplate our deeper living and the way we live our lives in our world, and how we might better do that in a deeper way, in a way that knows ourselves and others better. We acknowledge the history of this traditional territory that we're on this morning, and always as we gather. When we do that, we recognize a longer history that reaches beyond and before colonization and the establishment of European colonies. We recognize the history and the significance of the indigenous people who lived and continue to live on this territory, and whose practices and spiritualities are tied to this land in ways that can never be separated. And so to acknowledge the land is to acknowledge the wisdom that it has for us, the wisdom that her peoples have for us. And so along with all our Treaty 6 brothers and sisters, the Cree, the Blackfoot, the Métis, the Nakota Sioux, the Iroquois, the Dene Ta, and the others who have called this home, we recognize the histories and the languages and the cultures and the spiritualities that can still inform us, can bring us to ourselves, and we recognize our partnership. When we gather here, we all have had different weeks that have been busy, weeks that have been boring, weeks that have been everything in between. And we come here to do a number of things. Sometimes just to see a friendly face and to say hello to some old friends, to make some new ones. Sometimes to go deeply into ourselves, and sometimes to be challenged to go deeper with others. Regardless, when we come, we invite ourselves to open our hearts and our minds and our spirits, not only to each other, but to our communities and to our world. So let us sing our way into that space as we open our hearts and our minds. time for sharing our life and work as a community. And I'll invite anyone with something to share, an announcement to make their way to the front. And as following up on some talk that we had a couple of weeks ago, we're going to continue that conversation, and I want to invite anyone who's interested to the lounge on this Tuesday evening at 7 p.m., where we're going to ask ourselves the questions: how can we continue to push ourselves asking relevant questions in our lives, in our spiritual lives, in our interaction with our world? Where can we go on this spiritual path? What is next on the expansive path that we're on? What do we need to explore and learn next? All these questions and more. Perhaps you have ideas of ways we might learn with one another and connect with one another in that learning space. We're going to do that on Tuesday, at least start doing that on Tuesday at 7, so please come. When we talk about supporting our life and work, we have to spend time giving thanks and sharing gratitude, because there are so many ways that we all give to this community, and they're all important. If you put even just a couple dollars in that box, if you give monthly out of your bank account through PAR, if you buy grocery cards, if you fill out an envelope faithfully every month or every week and put it in that box, we are so grateful for all the ways that you give financially. And then that doesn't even touch on the ways that we all contribute time and effort and energy to this community. So thank you so much for doing that. As I mentioned, there are all those ways that we can contribute to the life of this community, and you're welcome to do that this morning by donating either here in person or online. As we light this candle this morning, we recognize, as we always do, the importance and the symbol of light in our lives. And we gather together as community, knowing that light is at our center, the light that we share between us, the light of the cosmos, the light of our hearts and spirits, the light of that which gives us hope, peace, and love in our lives. And so we gather together today, centered around this light that will give us meaning, that will remind us of all the things that we sing about: the earth, the sun, the cosmos, and our place in it. Let's sing together. I welcome anyone who wants to come for a time for all ages. We're going to share a story today. Good morning. Morning, morning. Did you know that we need each other? Yeah, easy, right? Easy. But it's easy to forget, too, that we need each other. That I need you, and that you need me, and that we need other people to help us in our lives. That we're responsible, not just for ourselves, but for each other. That's kind of cool, but that's also kind of scary to think that what we do can help another person or can hurt another person. So that means what we do is pretty important. So I want to read you a story about that called Pass It On. It is by Sophie Henn. It goes like this. When you see something terrific, smile a smile and pass it on. If you chance upon a chuckle, he, and pass it on. If something happens that's amazing, whoop it up and pass it on. Should you spot a thing of wonder, jump for joy and pass it on. With all the smiles you have made and the joy you've spread about, you'll find the world's a little nicer and those smiles a little brighter. Sometimes the fun and glee aren't in their usual place, but search around, there's always some. A hum, a hug, a happy face. This is when the book gets good, I think, because it's not always easy to find the good things that you want to share with people. Sometimes we have to look pretty hard. So, if they're not in their usual places, search around. So when the sky is gray and rainy, you'll know just what to do. Grab your wellies and your coat. You know what wellies are? Yeah, yes. Yeah, rubber boots, exactly. Grab your wellies and your coat, splash a smile, and pass it on. If you feel a little lonely, don't let that worry you. Just branch out. See who's there. Find some fun and pass it on. And when you least expect it, like a bolt out of the blue, a smile or a chuckle will be passed right back to you. Thank you. It's perfect. Which means we're not always giving the stuff and sharing it. Sometimes we enjoy the happy moment. Let that feeling fill you up. Then, have a ball, raise the roof, kick your heels, and pass it on. It's just such a very short and simple story, but I think it's great to be reminded that we can give wonderful things to people and receive wonderful things. We can give our love, we can accept love. We can give a smile, we can accept a smile, because we will need it some days. And other people will need it some days. And that's how we take care of each other. Well, this is our time on the carpet. And now it's time to go.
These are words from the book of Romans in Christian scriptures. Instructions for community life to Rome. As a community, we are like the various parts of a human body. Each part gets its meaning from the body as a whole, not the other way around. Each of us finds our meaning and function as a part of the whole body. But as a chopped off finger or cut off toe, we wouldn't amount to much, would we? So since we find ourselves working as all these excellently formed and marvelously functioning parts of one body, let's just go ahead and be who we are, without enviously or pridefully comparing ourselves with each other or trying to be something we're not. If you speak, go ahead and speak. If you help, just help, don't take over. If you teach, do it well. If you give encouraging guidance, be careful that you don't get bossy. If you're put in charge, don't manipulate. If you're called to give aid to people in distress, keep your eyes open and be quick to respond. If you work with the disadvantaged, don't let yourself get irritated, but keep a smile on your face as a gift to them. Love from the center of who you are, don't fake it. Despise what is destructive and hold fast to what is good. Be good friends who love deeply. Outdo one another in showing honor. Be patient and persevere in integrity. These are words shared by an early Christian community.
Well, I'd like to show you a weird little video right now as our second piece of wisdom, third piece of wisdom. This is Android, the company that makes smartphones, made a commercial a number of years ago called Monotune, and this is the making of that commercial, which then also shows it to you at the end. it's strange because you'd never think that anyone would do what they do in this video. But in any case, I want us to treat this video as a parable, which I think it is. And let's just watch it and see what happens. In gratitude for creativity and diversity, may we find wisdom for our living. So what we learn from evolutionary biology, among countless other things, is a little bit of how we evolved as human beings. We know, because scientists tell us that the very earliest development, the very first part of the brain to develop was the stem of the brain and the cerebellum. The parts that control our just most basic functions, you know, our safety, our drive for food, our drive as a species to procreate. But the second oldest part of our brain to evolve is our limbic system, and it's developed because we are social creatures in need of social interaction. And early to develop because of how important it was to cooperate in order to survive. And to cooperate, we need to be social creatures. We can't be isolated and survive for very long. We are hardwired to be that way. We evolved, like many mammals, with an innate drive to be together in groups and to bond with certain members of those groups. And that is great for survival. And it's all wrapped up, though, in status and social conventions. And it's wrapped up in us wanting to belong to a group. We want to know our standing in that group. That's also a survival instinct, to know, am I in danger of being excluded by the group? And if I'm excluded by that group, then I'm probably out on the plains somewhere and I won't survive very long. Now that we live in the 21st century, our circumstances may have changed, but those evolutionary bits of our brain haven't changed any, really. They still provide the same drives for us, the drive to be connected, the drive to know our standing in a group. This part of our brain is very satisfied when we know the organizational structure of any group that we belong to know not only where we fit into it, but how we can make our way through it, and how we can succeed. Our very genetic coding has us look to our groups to help us understand ourselves. Community has the power not only to impact our identity, but to shape our health and our resilience. Today, we're asking the question, what shapes us? Why do we play a part in shaping, not why, who? Who do we play a part in shaping as the kind of people that we are becoming? And who are those people that shape us? Writer Emma Sepalia writes that we are shown in so many ways through science and through social convention that more than traditionally thought risk factors like obesity, smoking, and high blood pressure, it's the lack of social connection that more accurately predicts vulnerability to disease and illness. I find that very amazing, that we think that things like obesity, smoking, high blood pressure are going to be the best indicators of our future health, but in fact, social connection more accurately can predict our health. Social connection strengthens our immune system, helps us recover from disease faster, may even lengthen our lives, studies say. Despite its clear importance for health and survival, sociological research suggests that social connectedness is waning at an alarming rate. A recent study showed, it's not a Canadian study, it's kind of North American-wide, but a recent study showed that the total number of close confidants that is, people with whom one feels comfortable sharing a personal problem with. The number of close confidants North Americans claimed to have in 1985 was 3, and in 2004 it dropped to 1. Now, maybe one close confidant is all we need in life, and that may be so. But if it continues the same trend, then what about when it reaches 0? The good news, Emma Sapalya writes, is that our sense of connection is internal. Researchers agree that the benefits of connection are actually linked to our subjective sense of connection, not how many friends we actually have numerically or according to the data, but how we feel about the connections we have. If we feel connected to others on the inside, then we still reap the same benefits anyway. She says, while we can't always control the number of friends we have, one thing we can take responsibility for is the state of mind that we see our connections, in how we see our connections. To feel connected, to do things where even if we're doing them alone among many, we feel a sense of connection with others. Doing the same task, being involved with those we share purpose or value with, even working in parallel with others. If we're not relating closely, that's okay. If we feel connected, we reap the benefits of that social connection. Which is all to say, I think, in other words, that the groups we're part of, or at the very least spend some time with, help shape our self-identity and our health. Wendell Berry, a favorite of many, Wendell Berry's poet, farmer, ecologist, essayist, he spoke often about the role of community. He believes that the health of the individual is linked, inseparable from the health of all around you. And he says these words, "If we are looking for insurance against want and oppression, we will find it only in our neighbor's prosperity and goodwill, and beyond that in the good health of our worldly places, our homelands. If we were sincerely looking for a place of safety, for real security and success, then we would begin to turn to our communities, and not the communities simply of our human neighbors, but also of the water, earth, and air, the plants and animals, all the creatures with whom our local life is shared." When we ask the question, "Who am I?" we can't really do it, Barry would say, without asking, "Who are we?" And that, for me, is why hearing, watching, reading the news of how we respond together to the challenges of our society, like a virus, like political upheaval, like racism. It gets harder for me, anyway, to ask, "Who are we?" and have any kind of answer that makes sense. However, Wendell Berry echoes the sentiments we find in the community instructions that Nell read for us to this young community in Rome in the decades following Jesus' death. Here is a group that is trying to figure out how to organize themselves around a new kind of living. If you're part of the Roman Empire and you're now then trying to organize yourselves around an understanding of love and compassion, mutual care and justice and community living in the example of their teacher, then you can imagine that they're bound to have some bumps along the way, because it's like going from one completely different thing to another in the way the Roman Empire was organized. So these instructions written to this community in Rome give them some encouragement to think of the community not as cutthroat competition, but more like each person working together based on strengths. There was a lot of wonderful words in those thoughts that Nell read to us, but just to return to a few of them. Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. Not all the members of the community have the same function. So let's just go ahead and be who we are without enviously or pridefully comparing ourselves with each other or trying to be something we aren't. Imagine this letter written to us. If you're smart, be smart. I mean, there were so many examples given in that passage about being good teachers, good leaders, good friends. But I imagine it to us in other ways too. If you're a troublemaker, make trouble for those who do injustice. The troublemakers have a place in our community. If you can start a dozen projects but can't seem to finish any of them, this is one that I'm speaking to myself, then be the idea person and share those ideas with the taskers in the group. If you're bossy, find a way to turn that towards positive leadership. If you're spoiled rotten, share the wealth. If you can't get by and you're just squeaking through, share that vulnerability and be surprised at the response of those around you. In other words, how are we using who we are to shape our communities and make them stronger and better? Nothing says we are who we hang around with like these early Christians that remind us of the health of the group and how it impacts the health of us as individuals. We're reminded of that wisdom continually in other parts of our tradition. Some of you may know words like this from other places. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. There's another one from another place. If one member suffers, all suffer together with it. If one member is honored, all rejoice together with it. These are all talking about the way we shape each other and the way we are with each other in community. We are shaped by who we are as an I and who we are as a we. We likewise shape others in the same way. I appreciate the Eastern wisdom of Lao Tzu when he talks about water. Water is fluid, soft, and yielding, but water will wear away rock which is rigid and cannot yield. This is a paradox. What is soft is strong. I think that analogy, that metaphor, applies very well to the strength of the strength of community. We may not have the power of us in our circle to change world policy. We may not have the power to change social stigma on a grand scale, to heal diseases or solve global problems, but we have that soft strength to be us and to shape those around us, and that strength eventually shapes the path of the river. Because we don't have to change the world's response to stigma or hatred. We only need to change one person's ability to feel connected and cared for in the face of that stigma and hatred. Well, can we talk about this piano? the one with 88 keys all tuned to middle C. What a fascinating and total waste of time experiment that is. It's just so amazing to me. And I like to view that video and that experiment as a wonderful parable of life, that if we're all the same, then the sense of community is false. That's not a piano, if you tune it that way. That's not the intention of a piano. If we're all the same, then the sense of community is false. That kind of unity isn't unity at all, it's uniformity. And there's a difference. The music and harmony created when the differences are functioning together, well, that's beautiful. We heard that when it was played on the correctly tuned piano. It's amazingly powerful and beautiful. And we didn't get to hear, I would have loved to ask G, the pianist, if he found it more difficult to play the middle C's than he did the other one. I mean, I can only imagine it would be, because you don't have the feedback in your ears. And likewise, I think it's much more difficult to be a part of a group where you can't let your own gift shine. If we're part of a community that says to us, we'd like you to be part of us, but please be more like us and less like you. That's not the community we want to be a part of. We can't make harmony if we're all singing the same note. Now, I just want to share with you briefly, I'm moving backwards in time. We heard Beethoven on the video. I want to talk to you about Bach for a minute. Writing a little bit earlier, he lived before Beethoven did, but Bach had this amazing, and I'm putting the words up there, this amazing thing he wrote about his music. And he says this: "In the architecture of my music, I want to demonstrate to the world the architecture of a new and beautiful social commonwealth. The secret of my harmony, each instrument in counterpoint and as many contrapuntal parts as there are instruments. It is the enlightened self-discipline of the various parts, each voluntarily imposing on itself the limits of its individual freedom for the well-being of the community." He's saying, he's got all these melodies going along at the same time. They're all very equal. They all have very exciting, interesting things going on, if you know the music of Bach. But not one of them is more important than the others. They all have this wonderful interplay between them that they back off to let another voice come, and then they come back to the fore. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's the middle of the quote. That is my message, not the thank you, autocracy, looked like a foreign word for a minute there. Not the autocracy of a single stubborn melody on the one hand, nor the anarchy of unchecked noise on the other. No, a delicate balance between the two, an enlightened freedom. The science of my art, the art of my science. The harmony of the stars in the heavens, the yearning for brotherhood in the heart of man. This is the secret of my music. Oh my goodness. I mean, maybe he was just a bombastic know-it-all, but in any case, he had this sense that art and music can be a symbol for that which we strive for in our world. Just as we conclude here, I want to share that in our communities, and we define communities in so many different ways. They could be our families, they could be our group of friends, they could be this group here, they could be our work communities. We are more than our role in any of them. And I think that's important for us to hear, because we sometimes get so pigeonholed into doing one thing. We're one thing for a person. We're one role for our children. We're mom or we're dad. And we're more than that. We're the board chair, we're the secretary, we're more than that. We are this or we are that. We are so much more than the labels given to us by our families, our communities. We're more than the traditions we were raised under. We are more than our accumulation of knowledge and experience. We are more than just another cog tuned to the same pitch. Just because we were shaped once by a set of values, beliefs, worldviews, doesn't mean we can't reshape ourselves and allow new communities to shape us. We are more than our own melody, I think Bach would say. We can have a solo spiritual life. We could read, we could improve ourselves, we could engage in all sorts of solitary practices. But if we don't have that interplay, positive and valuable community, we won't fully know who we are and just how melodious our notes are. It would be an empty universe indeed if we didn't have people to encourage us and love us. And maybe even more important than that, it would be empty if we didn't have those who are vastly different from us, pushing us, nudging us, elbowing us to see just if who we are and what we are about is for real or not. How we treat each other as we learn who we are and do what we need is really the whole point of community. It's the practice field. And I hope that that's the way we see our circle here and our community as we gather with the practice room. Discover how we live out who we are. It's where, among some caring and kind people, we can try a new thing, maybe try out a new value and a new emphasis in our lives, and find out who we are, and where we can make mistakes in doing that, and surrounded by those who will pick us up and forgive us, and say to us, well, we'll try that again. We have every reason to care because we're only as healthy as our communities. So as we work to make them stronger and fitter, we are stronger and fitter. And we shape each other along the way in our connections to one another. So the last words will belong to Stephen Hawking. It's a cavalcade of heroes in my life, I guess, today. Stephen Hawking, theoretical physicist, who writes these words: "We are all time travelers, journeying together into the future. But let us work together to make sure that the future is a place we want to visit." May it be so for us, and may we work to make it so in so many ways. Let's share closing words that strengthen our intentions for us each in our lives as individuals and as community. We are a grateful, open, and attentive people. Grateful for a creativity within that breathes dreams into our little bit of stardust. We are open to a compassion within that energizes us to care and to act. May we awaken to all the possibilities that our lives hold. Be stirred to grow in the ways of love, justice, and connection to each other. As those who seek courage to create community with one another, may we work to make it so.